I want to spend time in Genesis. Keep in mind, I'm going to point back to this. Keep in mind that we just started the book of Genesis as our first reading this week. And this comes right on the heels of the book of Hebrews that we heard for a long time, which was all about the priesthood of Jesus Christ. And this is not accidental, even though they might seem unrelated at first. Let me just briefly touch on a few things. So in this sort of closer panned-in view of the creation, where it really focuses on the creation of humanity, it says that the Lord God formed man out of the clay of the ground and blew into his nostrils the breath of life, and so man became a living being. This becomes an image of Christ. Why do I say that? Well, if you'll notice in this moment, Adam has no mother, but he does have a father. He's made in the image and likeness of God, which is language of sonship. But his mother is really the womb of the dirt. He's brought forward out of the dirt of the earth. And so in the same way, this is an image of Christ who has died and has been buried in a tomb. And so just as this soil is a virgin soil, it's never been tilled because no one has tilled it before. Adam's the first. So Christ is laid in a tomb that the Gospels specifically mention, in which no one has ever laid. And the Father brings him forward out of the womb of the tomb. And here, God then breathes his spirit into the nostrils of Adam. But where Jesus supersedes Adam is that Jesus, once he has been brought forward out of the womb of the tomb, he breathes the Spirit onto the apostles. He is the giver of true divine life. And so God is using this image to help us understand what Christ is doing. And Jesus, of course, is the actual Son of God in a very profound way. Then it says, then the Lord God planted this garden, and he placed there the man whom he had formed. Really interesting here is that in ancient times, there was a very specific word that when the pagans would take a deity and they would place it into a niche in the wall of their temple, they would employ this word in a unique form. And so Genesis uses that same word in that form to say that God is placing the man whom he'd formed into the garden, which yields a few things. Number one is it points to the divinity that God intended humanity to possess. That Jesus ultimately, as the new Adam, is going to be the deity, but it also makes the garden the temple. And so this is where we start connecting back into Hebrews, right? So Adam is a priest in the temple of the garden, and that word makes that clear to ancient minds. The use of that word, which is very unique, it was not a common word, in that position makes that clear. In the same way that Hebrews will then pick up on Jesus as the true high priest who enters through the veil into the actual temple of God, which is the divine sanctuary of heaven, and ministers there through his passion and his wounds. And so he charges then Adam, once he's there, he says he settles him in the Garden of Eden to cultivate and to care for it. But the words here really mean to work it and to guard it, to work the work and to guard essentially the sanctuary. This is priestly language. The work that is worked is the liturgy, which means the divine work. And so the priests, from the Jewish perspective where these words are employed, works by celebrating the liturgy in the worship of God, and he guards by making sure nothing profane or unclean ever enters into the sanctuary. Now, Adam's going to fail in this, right? Because the snake's going to get in. But Jesus does not fail because he sanctifies everything that he touches, and what he achieves on the cross as the new Adam and then passes through the veil into the heavenly sanctuary is the sanctification of humanity, the purification of what is properly God's that we appeal to through a robust sacramental life. This is pretty awesome. But what value does any of this have for us? I mean, that's great biblical theology, right? I mean, if you want more, let's hang out. But the point is, when we see these connections, I think the most valuable aspect to the spiritual life that it offers us is, number one, to recognize none of this is an accident, right? That this is impossible for humanity to just make up across the span of thousands of years, that becomes fulfilled in a historically verifiable way with explosive meaning. So if it really is impossible, that means God does it. And if God is doing it, our faith should be fanned into flame, which should result in us just maybe trusting Jesus. Like, all right, if he really is trying to sanctify, if this is what he accomplishes and he doesn't make mistakes in his task, then if I follow him and do what he says, like we're going to hear the Sermon on the Mount on Sunday, if I actually listen to the Sermon on the Mount and I integrate that in my life, then I'm allowing him to work the work and to guard the sanctuary of my soul. But to the extent that I resist and I push back and I dismiss or treat with apathy, then I'm not creating an alternative path. I'm abandoning the only path available to me to life. Because all of Adam's office and his works were ordered toward life, and he failed. But Jesus will not fail. And so what he's trying to do in my life, if I yield, if I offer him my docility, will bring me into the fullness of life, and he cannot fail if I let him in.